What did the Black Panther Party stand for? What did they want? And how were they different from other civil rights organizations? The Black Panther Party was the offspring of racial tensions and political renaissance. African Americans in the 60s and 70s began to see public figures that looked like them making a difference around them using political tactics. This was incredibly important in shaping African American identity, and it won many of the rights and services that African Americans still benefit from today. However, there were two very different sides to this movement and Afro-politicism as a whole. The first side is the side that is most talked about, glorified, and praised in today's society. It was a practice called nonviolence. True pacifism, or nonviolent resistance, King wrote, is a courageous confrontation of evil by the power of love, according to the Stanford Institute. This method of movement seemed much slower and required African Americans to willingly suffer at the hands of white people, often being beaten and brutalized, in order to not only prove something to the world, but to diminish the public reputation of their opposition slowly over time. They would march peacefully together on Selma and were famously stormed by the cops unprovoked. This was all good and peachy, but there was a lot of progress to be made, and many African Americans did not think that it would happen quickly enough, or at all in some cases, if all black leaders could do was give speeches, get beaten publicly, and march peacefully at their own risk. This was the main reason that many young African Americans bought into the other faction of this movement, the Black Nationalist movement, most notably the Black Panther Party. Black nationalism, according to Britannica, quote, sought to acquire economic power and infuse among blacks a sense of community and group feeling, as an alternative to being assimilated by the American nation, which is predominantly white. Black nationalists sought to maintain and promote their separate identity as a people of black ancestry, end quote. Bearing this ideology and the laws of the states that they worked in, the Black Panther Party established itself as a radical socialist party, radical meaning to seek structural change, and held conventions and events around the country about the state of African Americans and other minorities in the country that face discrimination. The Black Panther Party was founded in 1966 by Huey Newton and Bob Seale to oppose police brutality towards African Americans. They worked with these or other groups and organized what was called the Rainbow Coalition, since it included poor whites and people of many different races. The young black people of this movement learned the law and brandished assault rifles in open carry states while they marched, similar to what we see today in white nationalist marches. Unlike their pacifist counterparts, the Panthers were not afraid to resort to violence for their cause. They were often involved in violent police skirmishes, and violence within the party occurred as well. However, the members of the Black Panther Party had a sense of empowerment because they had banded together in a strong and concrete way to other people who shared their experiences around the country. They often prided themselves on knowing the law and could usually maneuver through illegal stops with legal fact if it was an option. However, many times it wasn't an option. A major downside to this approach was that many people saw the Black Panther Party as a threat, especially the US government. In their eyes, the African American community was being united, and if they were united, they would be strong enough to resist large-scale oppression that allowed other white people to profit at their expense and feel more comfortable. Not to mention that this massive political gravitas with these many groups of people, minorities, could easily spell fundamental change in the imbalance of power. In fear of the shift of mentality among young black citizens, the US government took action against the movement. They did this by unlawfully murdering prominent members and registering the Black Panther Party as a threat to national security. Because of a plethora of factors, the Revolutionary Party soon met its demise. The party dwindled down after the FBI aimed counterintelligence activities to weaken the party, and nonviolent civil rights protests took center stage during the mid-60s through 70s, and thus, the party became inactive in the early 80s. The Black Panther Party and the Black Nationalist movement brought minorities together and were able to scare those in power enough to be considered a threat, and so they were eliminated. They pushed the boundaries of what black identity was and changed the way that the demographic engaged in politics forever. Obviously, the party was too radical and too blatantly ambitious to survive with lasting credibility at the time. But they were able to muster courage and confidence in the black community that had hardly been seen before, and frankly, hasn't been seen since. I found this topic interesting, and I hope that you did too. Until next time, this has been TheRealG. Like the video? Be sure to subscribe, comment, hit the notifications, and share this with your friends.